Hey everyone! Before the video starts, I want to mention that I'll be posting something super cool within the next week or so on my Twitter account that you're all going to really like. If you want to keep updated with that and other videos, you can follow me at Johnstone YT. Okay, onto the video. What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. Among the many of the little additions to Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver, the Pokeathlon Dome is definitely one of the most unique pieces of side content that have ever been brought to a remake. Just like Pokemon contests, these games have medals that you can win, but what does it take to get them all? Today we're going to find out how easily you can obtain every medal in Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver's Pokeathlon tournaments. For those who have no idea what the Pokeathlon tournament is, it's essentially Game Freak's take on a Pokemon-style Olympics. You take 3 Pokemon that you use in your playthrough and make them compete in events with a touchscreen in order to win medals. Just like many other elements in these games, they're simple on the outside, but are pretty intricate when you really get into it. The Pokeathlon area was created in one of the many new locations in Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver. If you head north of Goldenrod City and reach the gate before the National Park, you can head to the left side of the building to access the main entrance. Upon going through the door, we're greeted by Magnus and his Poliwrath, who is the founder of the Pokeathlon Dome, and has probably the shortest Bulbapedia article in the history of Pokemon. He suggests that we should take on the events within the building and see how many medals that we can obtain. This area of the map doesn't contain a lot of stuff that you can do aside from the main attraction, but Game Freak did a great job at making the area feel like you're at a real competition. There are plenty of trainers and even shops that you can go to, but before we get into too much detail, let's check out why we're really here. The Pokeathlon Dome's events are all split into 5 different courses: Speed, Power, Stamina, Skill, and Jump. These have a lot of similarities to the contest rankings or berry flavors that we've seen in many of the games, but there are a lot of elements that really expand on this system. Every Pokemon in this game is ranked on a scale of 1 to 5 stars in each of the 5 categories, which means that you're able to use literally any Pokemon you have in any of the formats. If you look at your Pokemon summary after you first enter the Pokeathlon Dome, you can see the stats of your Pokemon. Although each Pokemon is given a set amount of stars when you obtain it, there are a lot of varying factors that influence how strong or how weak it can really be. If a Pokemon has outlines of a star in any of the categories, it means that it can have as many as there are shown. If it has big orange stars, it means that it's more powerful than it usually is, and if it has tiny stars, it's weaker than its normal potential. Now, if you've taken on the Pokeathlon Dome before, you know that it's actually really easy to complete all the events and win all the medals in the tournaments, as there are a lot of Pokemon that can very quickly sweep up the competition. Because I wouldn't be doing anything too out of the ordinary by just taking it on itself, I decided to make it a little more interesting. If you look online, there's a comprehensive list of all the base course stats for each Pokemon, which gives an average to determine who the best Pokemon are before any increases or decreases are made to their stats. Including form changes, there are over 500 Pokemon that you can choose from, and surprisingly, a large majority of them are pretty good. But because that would make this too easy, I was curious to see what would be the literal worst team I could possibly make and still be able to win all the medals. I'm sure a lot of people would start comparing base stat totals and say that I should do something like first route Pokemon, or even go as low as the bottom of the barrel Pokemon like Sunkern. Ironically, Sunkern is actually tied for the best Pokemon in the entire game, as it can have up to 5 stars in every category if you do a lot of trial and error. This is obviously a little Easter egg that Game Freak threw in for the laughs, but for the most part, the rating system is completely separate from any other element in the game. But who is technically the worst Pokemon in the game? Well, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom of the list, we'll find out that it's none other than Feebas. Feebas has the lowest average star rating of 2.2, with its only redeemable stats starting at 2, but can go as high as 5 stars. Power and Jump are at a 2, while Skill and Stamina will always be stuck at a single star. Although its stats are already really terrible, I want to take it a step further. Like I mentioned earlier, the Pokemon stars can increase or decrease depending on a lot of scenarios. If we head to the left side of this area, we can talk to the shopkeeper who gives us an item called the Aprijuicer. This essentially works in the same way that Pokeblocks do, as you can blend apricorns to increase a specific stat that your Pokemon has, but in turn, one of your other stats can also be decreased. Although you can blend them yourself for better results, you can buy them from the merchant to skip all the hassle. Because they're intended to help you more than hurt you, you have to mess around with which ones you purchase to decrease all the stats that can be adjusted. Fortunately, because 2 of Feebas' stats can't change, you can use the juices that normally increase those to decrease the others. In addition to using the stand, its nature, personality value, and even the day of the month can change which stats are increased and what stats are decreased. After a lot of trial and error, I bred each of my Feebas to have a docile nature, which can reduce jump but increase stamina, which it can. Although I was able to get all 3 Feebas to have 1 star in the first 4 categories, no matter what day I set it to in the month, none of the jump stats changed for any of the Feebas. I'm not exactly sure why this happened, but I assume that the game will refuse to let any Pokemon have only 1-star ratings across the board. With this information, I know some people might wonder why I specifically chose to use Feebas, when realistically you can reduce the stats on any Pokemon to 1 star. While that may be true, because some of the stats are limited to only having 1 star, it makes it extremely easy to manipulate the game into decreasing all of its stats. If you use it on a better Pokemon like Lugia, you're going to be increasing a stat every time you decrease one, making it almost impossible to get anything close to having only 1 star. Now that we've made our team of little gamers, it's time to see how difficult this can really be. So like I mentioned earlier, there are 5 different categories that we can compete in, with 3 challenges within each one. There are 10 different games that we can play, which means that some are recycled within each course, so if I briefly skip over some of them, just know that I've already talked about it before. The first course that we're going to take on is the Speed course. As the name implies, each challenge that we have to face is based around being faster than our opponents. Every course starts out with meeting the contestants, which slightly has influence on how difficult the playthrough can actually be. It's definitely not nearly as bad as the bug catching contest from the Gold and Silver Catch-em-all, but you can easily notice which trainers are stronger than others. The first challenge we have to take on is the Hurdle Dash. In this game mode, you can control all 3 of your Pokemon and try and clear the hurdles while making it to the end of the finish line. If you tap your Pokemon, it will jump, which you have to time correctly or you'll crash into one of the hurdles. Because Feebas is ridiculously slow, you have to be as precise as you can, and thankfully there's a quick way to increase your speed. If you jump right before you touch the hurdle, you'll gain a blue speed boost. If you do this 4 times without crashing, your boost will change color, which is the maximum speed that you can run. This mechanic also works if you jump too early on a hurdle. If you tap your Pokemon when you're about to land on it, you'll jump off of it instead and still gain the speed boost. The first time I went through this was when I realized how frustrating this challenge was going to be. I finished with a combined time of 150 seconds, which was about 40 seconds later than first place. So I have a bad feeling that it's going to take a lot of work to get these medals. The second event is the Pennant Capture. This is essentially a version of Capture the Flag, as you flick your stylus to move your Pokemon to collect the pennants that randomly appear on the playfield. You control 1 Pokemon at a time, trying to avoid all the obstacles, and when you've collected up to 9 flags, you have to bring them back to the starting line in order to earn your points. This is one of the many events that were initially pretty frustrating to do correctly, as our Pokemon isn't fast and can be very easily pushed around. If a Pokemon collides with you from behind, you get stunned and can drop up to 2 flags that your opponent can collect. Because our stamina is so low, when Feebas gets hit, you're unable to do anything but wait until it can move again. This game mode only lasts for 60 seconds, so you have to really try and avoid as many of your opponents in order to get a good score. The final event in this course is the touchscreen's worst nightmare, the Relay Run. In this game, you have to flick your stylus across the screen to repeatedly make your Pokemon dash through the course. There are obstacles that you have to avoid, but in the many times that I've tried this, there's always a pretty defined path that you can dash through without too much effort. The goal for this is to run as many laps as you can before the timer ends, which is surprisingly easy considering how terrible our stats are. If you keep a Pokemon in for too long, it will start sweating and running slower, which means that you have to switch it out for another Pokemon on your team. From my experience, Feebas was able to run a little over a lap and a half each time before needing to be swapped. So as long as you avoid the dirt patches and other Pokemon, you should win this every time. Once the events have been completed, the judge totals all the scores from each of the events, as well as the small team bonuses that your Pokemon can receive. These can range from stuff like not hitting any hurdles, to not fainting in the relay run. These typically don't have too much influence on the actual score, and because I did very badly in the first 2 events, I came in 3rd. Thankfully though, I learned from my mistakes pretty quickly, and was able to earn a lot more points in the Hurdle Dash, so after about 20 minutes, I won with a score of 351. But the second course is definitely not going to be as easy. The Power course contains another 3 new courses, and each of them have their own potential to give us quite a lot of trouble. The first and definitely most challenging in the entire game is Block Smash. This is basically a variant of the relay race, as you have to destroy the slabs in front of your Pokemon to earn points. For every time you hit one, your Pokemon will get progressively weaker, which means you have to swap them out with another member on your team. Because this event combines power with stamina, it's significantly more difficult to do well in. Each of my Feebas were only able to break about 2 blocks before having to be swapped out, and if you accidentally tap a block when the switch button is flashing, your Pokemon will get stunned for a while, which can happen a lot if you're playing on an original DS like I was. On my first try, I managed to break 20 blocks, which isn't too bad considering how— Oh. The next event is Circle Push. In this game, every Pokemon is placed on the same board, and you have to move your team into the numbered spots that are randomly placed on the field. If you manage to get your Pokemon in one of the circles by the end of the time, you earn whatever number you're standing in for that round. Each round adds more circles with higher values, but the size of the circles decrease to the point where only a few Pokemon can stand in the area. Because there aren't any borders, you can push or be pushed off the edge of the map, but you respawn in your respective corner after a few seconds. Because Feebas can't really do a lot of pushing, it's best that you try and go to locations that most people aren't. But as you get into the later rounds, the timer moves so fast that you just have to go to the closest spot to you. The final task in this course is the goal roll. Each player starts out in front of their own goal, and it's your job to push the ball into any of the other goals on the field. I'm gonna be honest, this one sucks. The first big issue with this game mode is that either the area is too small, or that there are too many players on the screen. Personally, I feel like it's more the second one, but that's only because if they made the characters too small, it would be impossible to drag your players around. I tried taking this on using only one Pokemon, but you really have to use your entire team to cover as much area as you can. It's pretty much useless trying to protect your goal, as you're going to get pushed around regardless of where you are, or the ball will smash right through you. I may be crazy for claiming this, but I swear that every time I played this, the balls would always spawn a little bit closer to my goal than anyone else. Because our team moves so slow, the real strategy to this is that you have to make the last move, rather than the first. It sounds like really backwards logic, but your opponents will almost always make the first and strongest move, so you have to focus on finding openings rather than trying to control the ball the entire time. Because you lose points every time a ball goes into your goal, I ended up getting 0 points for this round, which earned me a total of 246 points, which is extremely bad even for using the worst Pokemon in the game. If you couldn't tell already, this is by far the hardest course to finish, as you're almost always at a 50-point deficit because of block break. The most I was ever able to get after almost 2 hours of trying was 30 blocks, which means you have to compensate by doing insanely well in the other two categories. Considering that both of them rely on quite a bit of luck, you can imagine how long it took me to actually get this done. The only real way to get first in this category is to focus on making one team do poorly in the last two game modes. I ended up getting a score of 47 in Circle Push, which almost everyone else only earned half of that score. Although the goal roll is still the shot in the dark, I tried aiming for either the green or yellow team's goals, as they were the ones that earned the most points in the first two events. After a lot of trial and error, I ended up winning the medal with a score of 360 points, which is only 16 more than second place. I was really relieved to finish this one, but that's mostly because the try before I lost by 6 points. Let's check out the next one. The skill course only has one new game mode, and thankfully it's a nice break from the last category. The first game is called Snow Throw. Each team is lined up to form a square, and it's your job to try and hit the opponents with as many snowballs as you can. Because nobody moves the entire match, you can just keep swiping in the same direction over and over and consistently hit the same Pokemon as long as they haven't already been hit by an opponent. Once you get consistent with the throws, it's almost impossible to lose this. I ended up getting 30, which is a pretty average score. The second event is Goal Roll, and thankfully everyone did terrible, so no one had an insane advantage. The final event is Pennant Capture, and because I had a lot of experience from the speed course, I managed to get a score of 35, which guaranteed that I would win this one. I earned the medal with a score of 354 points, which beat out everyone by at least 60. The Stamina course also has only one new event, Ring Drop. One player from each team is put in a ring, and you have to try and push your opponents off, or deal as many hits as you can before the timer is up. This one's pretty interesting, as you earn 1 point for every hit that you connect, so even if you don't knock anyone out of the ring, you can still earn a lot for trying. From what I noticed, if you swipe a lot and end up knocking a Pokemon off, the game will try and catch up with your inputs and dash you off the ledge. Every time you fall off by your own fault, you lose 10 points, which basically resets your score before you had that interaction. After earning almost no points from multiple tries, I found out if you tap your Pokemon, they'll jump in the air and smash down on the ring. If an opponent is close enough, they'll make contact with you and fly off the side of the ring. This definitely helps avoid losing points, but your Pokemon will get fatigued very easily if you do it too much, which makes you vulnerable to getting smacked across the field. With some trial and error, I managed to get a score of 53, which beat out everyone else by a pretty solid amount. The next challenge is the Relay Run. Because your opponents are based on stamina rather than speed, you have a much better chance of winning by a larger margin. I'd like to think that this was my best event, and I ended up doing about 2 more laps than everyone else. The final event is unfortunately Block Smash, but because I dominated the first 2 categories, I was able to win the whole course by only 12 points with a score of 277. Now let's check out the final course. The jump course contains 2 new events to round out our total of 10 courses, and realistically this should be our easiest course because our jump stat is our only one with 2 stars. The first event is Lamp Jump. The event starts out with your whole team on a platform, and the objective is to fling your Pokemon up in the air to hit the lights that are above them. In order to get the most points, you have to try and hit as many lamps as you can before touching the ground. If you hit more than 4, you earn 5 points for every additional one that you touch. This seems pretty easy to do, but there are a few things that can give you trouble. If one of your Pokemon land too close to another, they'll both be stunned and unable to be launched for a period of time. You're still able to move the one that was unaffected, but there are a couple scenarios where I ended up stunning all 3, which makes it much harder to earn points than it already is. Because Feebas can't jump very high, you can't even touch the top lamps, which puts you at an insane disadvantage from the rest of the Pokemon that you face. The most annoying thing, however, is probably the controls. The detection for swiping is so inconsistent, and no matter how fast or how slow I swipe down to launch them, it sometimes just doesn't register. Once again, this could be because the original DS's screen is pretty awful compared to the updated models, but I'm pretty confident that the controls also play a huge role in that too. The second event is Disc Catch. The game starts out by placing every Pokemon on a platform, and you have to catch the frisbees that fly over you to earn points. The catch though is that if you're closer to the bottom of the screen, you earn more points for each one that you collect. So you have to make the decision if you want to grab them before everyone else, or wait to reap the highest reward. You're able to knock other opponents off the screen, but because this minigame moves so fast, you don't really have time to waste on hurting your opponents. The discs will eventually start coming in pairs, with one moving a lot faster than the other. Oddly enough, a lot of the Pokemon won't even attempt getting most of them, so as long as you cover enough space, you can win this without a problem. The final event is the Hurdle Dash. Because I spent a lot of time in the first course, I mastered this mode relatively quickly. I ended up winning the course with a score of 351, which means that we have obtained every medal that the Pokeathlon has to offer. But there are still a couple more things that we can do. Now that we've cleared through every course with the worst team in the history of teams, we're now able to access the Trust and Potential rooms downstairs. The Trust room is pretty uneventful, as it's only a showcase for all the Pokemon that have earned all 5 of the medals. Because we've only used Feebas, this area is pretty empty. The Potential room, however, is where things get interesting. If we go to the hub in the center, we can check all of our event records. As you can see, there are only 3 that are lit up, which means that we only hold the record in these categories. Although we've already technically completed the challenge, I took it upon myself to see just how difficult it would be to get every gold medal. I want to note that in addition to the gold medals, you can also obtain trophies if you beat the records that the game sets for each game mode. So let's briefly check out each one and see if they're possible. I want to note that I tried at least 15 times in each category to beat my previous scores, which I feel like is enough tries to confirm or deny if they're possible. I also reset over a lot of my failed attempts in order to save time, so you won't notice a big difference in the amount of tries that we took when we look back at the final scores. In Hurdle Dash, the gold record was having a combined time of less than 100 seconds, or less than 80 seconds to receive the gold medal. Because there's a cap on how fast you can go in this game mode, even if you get the max boost the earliest that you can, the only score that a Feebas can get is 114.2 seconds with this team. In Pennant Capture, the record is 35 flags, but the trophy requires that you get 50 flags. Because it's so ridiculously easy to get stunned in this game, the highest score I was able to get was 36 flags, which obviously earns the gold medal, but you'd have to be insanely lucky to get any over 40. I already had the gold medal for Circle Push with 47 points as you saw earlier, but the trophy requires that you get 60. Considering that a perfect game is 66 points, you're probably not going to have a great shot with pulling this off with any selection of Pokemon. I also want to note that with this run, I managed to get a score of 447 in the speed group, so if anyone wants to challenge me in beating that, good luck. As you can expect, Block Break's record definitely can't be broken. The gold is 80 blocks, and the trophy is 130. I got 30. In Disc Catch, the gold requires over 40 points, and the trophy requires over 70 points. I managed to get a score of 41, but in order to get 70, you have to grab pretty much every disc that's thrown in the 5-point range. I can't imagine many people have come even close to pulling this off. Snow Throw was definitely one of the easier ones to finish. After learning the throwing patterns, I managed to get a total of 60 hits, which earns us the gold as well as the trophy. I spent a lot of time trying to improve my score in Goal Roll, as you need to earn 9 points to get the trophy. But after a ridiculous amount of attempts, the highest I could possibly get was 8, which I'll admit was just dumb luck. Because of that, I managed to get a score of 486 in the skill category, which is the highest score that I earned in any of the courses. In ring drop, the high score is 70, but after learning how to use the ground pound attack really well, I managed to get a score of 146, which allowed me to get the trophy. I earned my record for relay race during the process of earning all the medals, but the trophy requires that you make 16 laps. Considering that I didn't collide with obstacles and swapped out immediately when I was supposed to, I'm pretty confident that 12 laps is the maximum that you can do. Finally, lamp jump's record is 350 for gold and 500 for a trophy. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get anything more than 238 points because of how low my Pokemon jumped. If I really put in a bunch of time, I'm sure I could get around 300 points, but there is no way you could get the trophy. And with that, we've successfully obtained every medal and attempted to collect every trophy in the Pokeathlon Dome. But how did I do? So let's review. Upon looking back at my records, I was able to get gold in every event except for the Hurdle Dash, Block Break, and Lamp Jump. And honestly, this is a lot better than I expected I would have done. I managed to only get the trophies for Ring Toss and Snow Throw, but considering how difficult the others are to win, I think I did a pretty good job. Overall, this challenge was a mix of being both easier and harder than I expected, depending on which aspect you look at. Like I mentioned earlier, as long as you can get a Feebas in Gen 4, this challenge is really easy to take on, and I'm really curious to see what scores you can pull off. I obviously won't be able to tell if you boost all the stats on your Pokemon to get a better score than mine, but if you manage to get some awesome scores, tweet me your records at Johnstone YT. Other than that, that's all there is to say about getting every medal in the Heartgold Soulsilver Pokeathlon. And that's going to do it for today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like and consider subscribing, as I'll be making more content like this very soon. If you have any other suggestions for videos that you'd like to see, leave a comment below. Follow me on Twitter to keep updated with new videos as they come out. Other than that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.